Now, there are a lot of theories out there about William Shakespeare. Some believe that Shakespeare never wrote any of his own works, and in actuality it was his wife. Others believe that Shakespeare is many people, and all just published under the same name, or any other person who may exactly be Shakespeare. You will find people who will tell you that Shakespeare was gay, or even bisexual. Today I would like to add my own theory to the mix, and that is William Shakespeare either had a deal with the devil or a demon. Let's get to know a little bit about William, and why I claim that he knows the devil. First, let's take a look at his history. Shakespeare is known today as a famous English poet, playwright, and actor of the Renaissance. Also that he was a member of King's Men's Company of the theatrical plays. What many people don't realize is how gosh darn mysterious this man is. He truly is a mystery. There are two primary sources that information is found on our good friend William, and that is his works, like his plays, poems, and sonnets, and another are official documents, like church or court records. While those may offer us a glimpse into what his life may have been like, there is no real insight into the man that was William Shakespeare. To cover what we know about William, we gotta go to the beginning, obviously, which is, of course, his birth, which makes sense, right? However, this guy appeared out of thin air. There are no birth records of William Shakespeare. He probably was summoned from the underworld, is what I would like to say. However, there are church records that do show that he was baptized at the Holy Trinity Church on April 26, 1564, which probably means that he is not a demon. After all, my understanding is that a demon cannot be baptized. However, I am not Christian, so I could be wrong. With all the information that experts have, it is accepted that the day of his birth was April 23rd, 1564. Now, he is by all means an only child, which is honestly a good thing. Have you seen how only child turn out? Let me tell you, they're weird. William is the third child to John Shakespeare and Mary Arden, a leather merchant and local land heiress, respectively. He has two older sisters, Jonah and Judith, and three younger brothers, Gilbert, Richard, and Edmund. When William was a child, John was a very successful merchant and basically a mayor, and John didn't start his decline until the late 1560s. Next, we move on to the next stage, unfortunately, of any child's life, which is, of course, schooling. Now, little William has almost no records of education, which leads me to believe that good pal William has made a deal with the devil for knowledge, or maybe even some lower demon. It's not clear, however. No one can say for sure that he didn't make a deal with the demon, that's for sure. However, scholars, aka skeptics, do believe he probably attended the King's New School, which taught reading, writing, and classics. If he did indeed attend school, being that he is the son of a public official, he would have gotten free tuition, which is pretty neat. All this uncertainty around his early life has led people to question about the authorship of his work, or even if he existed in the first place. Which makes sense after all. Who's to say that William Shakespeare isn't a collective hallucination? It could be possible. You can't just say for sure everybody just had a collective hallucination, someone just decided to pick up the name and roll with it. Enough of that though. If he did exist, then he got married to Anne Hathaway on November 28th, 1582. William was 18 and Anne was 26 and pregnant. And can I just say, it's nice to see for once that a man is not marrying a significantly younger girl, and you all know what I mean. William and Anne had 3 children. Their first child, Susanna, was born May 26, 1583, and 2 years later, on February 2nd, 1585, Hamnet and Judith were born. Hamnet, though, died at unknown causes at the age 11. I don't want to jump to conclusions here, but I'm going to anyways. Could it be the work of a demon taking what it was promised? After all, Hamnet was their only son, and back in those days, boys were the more important child. It's not a big stretch to think that William made a deal with the demon and promised his first son in return. Why it took 11 years, I couldn't tell you, because I don't know. I'm not a demon. I don't know how that all works. After the birth of the twins, William up and vanished again. Honestly, this man could have been a magician if nothing else worked out for him. There are no records of what he was doing, which sounds fishy to me. Maybe some witchcraft? Who is to say? Scholars, however, call these the lost years, which ain't wrong and kind of a lame name for how uncreative it is. It is believed and accepted that William moved to London somewhere in the 1580s and got a job as a horse attendant for some theatres. By the 1590s, documents show up again that William was managing a partner in the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which was the most important troop of its time, and changed its name to the King's Men following the crowning of King James I in 1603. Good for him and all, but quite a large jump he did from being off the grid to, hey, look at me, I'm the most important trope around. Truly, though, was he spending those so-called years perfecting his craft? In this case, I'm not talking about his writing skills, but his possible witchcraft skills. To make the perfect deal with the demon, to make it big, to get seen, to become famous? It's unclear. 1592 shows evidence that Shakespeare earned a living as an actor and a playwright in London, and possibly had several plays produced. Even had some people with some bruised egos writing about him. On September 20th, 1592, an article was published by Robert Greene that targets William. He wrote, "There is an upstart crow, beautiful with our feathers, but has his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide. Suppose he is as well as the bombast out at the blank verse at the best of you, and being an absolute Jonas factum, it is in his own conceit that only shakes in the country." Which, what? Like, sir, what are you saying? Because I sure don't know, and neither do the so-called experts. I think Greene is trying to say he thinks William thinks he's better than them, which, yeah, maybe. The man is clearly either a demon or works for the devil. I think he's allowed to think like that. However, once again, the scholars come in, and most believe that it was Greene's way of saying Shakespeare was reaching above his rank, trying to match better known and educated playwrights. There's a little bit of disagreement on what Greene was really saying, but that's the general consensus. Of course, fast forward a few years later and go to 1597. William was crushing it and already written and published 15 of his 37 plays. Now, records around this time show that he bought a house, which is the second largest house in Stratford, called New Home for his family, which pretentious much? And what a lame name. However, since the house was in Stratford and not in London, it has led scholars to believe he has spent most of his time in the city and came home once a year during the 40-day Lent period. Not really a family man, though if he did sacrifice his son for some deal with the devil, this is no surprise. Anyway, moving on. In 1599, William and his pals built the Globe Theatre on the south bank of the Thames River. Today, if you want, you could go and watch a play in the reconstructed version of the Globe Theatre. Enough of his life. Let's take a closer look at his plays. William's early plays were written in a controversial style of the day, with elaborate metaphors and rhetorical phrases that didn't always align naturally with the story's plot or characters, which could have shown his skills in making deals with otherworldly beings. For example, you have all your bases covered when making some deal that benefits you and not to die, obviously. You gotta be creative and wordy with it. After all, you wouldn't want your opponent, I guess, to realize you are getting the better deal. At least, that's how I imagined a deal with a demon would go, because I, of course, have never made a deal with a demon. No siree. Moving on. William was able to write 37 plays over a course of 2 decades, which is 1590 to 1613, and he wrote primarily around 4 main themes: histories, tragedies, comedies, and tragicomedies, which honestly, good for him. Most of his early stuff were histories as well as some comedies, example being Richard II, A Midsummer Night's Dream, A Merchant of Venice, The Twelfth Night, The Comedy of Errors, and many others. In his later period, which was after the 1600s, He wrote tragedies as well as tragicomedies, example being Hamlet, King Lear, Macbeth, and The Tempest, and many others. This man had to have a whole lot of time in his hands that's for sure. It's generally believed that William died on his 52nd birthday on April 23rd, 1616. However, some scholars do believe this is false because church records show he inherited the Trinity Church on April 25th, 1616. I don't know about you, but I'm with some of those scholars that don't think he died on April 23rd. Because, I could be wrong, but dead people don't inherit things. I hear you, though, saying that what if the church didn't know he was dead, which is why he inherited? Still, I raise you this. It's the church. People had funerals, and William was probably religious, so wouldn't that mean that they would at least, know about his death? Once again, I would like to say I'm not Christian, so I could honestly be wrong about this one. No one knows the true cause of William's death. It is believed that he died from an illness, however, which is clearly false. This supposed death day is false, so I have reason to believe that whatever demon he made a deal with was sick of waiting and went and claimed his soul, which, good initiative, I guess. In his will, he left almost everything to his eldest daughter, Susanna. Though entitled to the third of his estate, little seems to have gone to his wife, Anne, whom he bequeathed the second best bad. However, maybe they had a bad relationship or weren't close. However, there's little evidence to show that they had a difficult marriage, which doesn't really say much, as not really anything is known about William's personal life. Though he did maybe live in London for most of the year by himself, which, I don't know about you, doesn't really scream I'm close to my wife. Alright, now that I'm done rambling about William, let's take a quick look at the play I will be discussing. The Tempest was first written and performed around 1611 and was published in 1623 from an edited transcript by Ralph Crane. It was one of the number of plays laid as part of the festives marking the marriage of Princess Elizabeth to Frederick, the Elector Palatine of Bohemia. The scene that I will perform is Prestero talking about the magical powers that he has and what he was able to do with them, and that he will give the powers up because he has decided to forgive the nobles, because they are sorry. In the scene I will be performing from Act 5, Scene 1 of The Tempest is mainly focused on Prestero. He starts his whole soliloquy because of his talks with Ariel. And the second half of his soliloquy is addressed to Alonso, Sebastian, Attino, Adrian, and Francisco. Now, I am performing a scene that is the last act of the plot, so I must describe basically the whole play to you. Basically, Prestero has used his magic to cause the ship to be destroyed, landing all the nobles on different places on the island that he inhabits. Prestero hopes to get revenge while his daughter wants to marry one of the survivors from the wreck. Everyone who is alive and wandering the island is just confused on what's happening and is starting to reconnect with each other. Stefano, Caliban, and Trinco plan to kill Prestero and have their plans foiled. Ariel brings everyone to the cell where this scene takes place.
Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves, and ye that on the sands with printless foot do chase the ebbing Neptune and do fly him, when he comes back, you demi-puppets that by moonshine do the green ringlets make, whereof the ewe not bites, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms that rejoice, to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I've bedimmed the moontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azur'd vault, set roaring war to the dread rattling thunder, have I given fire and rifted drove stoke oak with his own bolt. The strong braced promontory have I made shaken by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, opt and let him forth. I hear abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, and even now I do, to work mine and end upon their senses that this eerie charm is for, I break my staff, bury it in certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than ever did plummet the sound, I drowned my book.
After the scene I performed, Prospero accepted his dukedom back, and Ferdinand and Miranda were betrothed. Sailors come to announce that the ship is able to set sail again, and Prospero fulfills his promise and frees Ariel while Caliban and the drunkard servants are rebuked. The play ends as they all go to celebrate their reunions, and Prospero asks the audience to release him from the play. This scene is overall very important because it's the moment in the play where Prospero gives up his magic and reveals himself for everybody to see. At the moment, he's not just giving up magic. No, he's finally pushing aside his anger and forgiving them. He doesn't allow himself to be an angry, bitter man anymore, but gives up the lonely, angry life of the island for a new beginning. The main theme of this scene is forgiveness, which is overall the message that the play hopes to convey. There's no need for someone to wallow their whole life in anger. It only leads to suffering, but once forgiveness is achieved, a better path will appear. The general consensus is that The Tempest is largely considered to be Shakespeare's most magical play. It is also one of his plays that have an original plot, not just The Tempest is mostly looked at and judged for English colonization ideology, seen as just about every character in the play thinks about how they would like to rule the island if they were the king, as well as making the only native on the island to be some sort of monster, as well as having the name Caliban being an anagram or derived from cannibal. Many critics judge the play harshly for its colonial view, while still being one of Shakespeare's most shortest and simplest plays. After reading the play, I cannot say it was my favorite. I'm not a fan of romance in general, and falling in love just after seeing someone also makes no sense to me, and usually does not endear me to the play. I also found Prospero forgiving everybody at the end to be useless. That is because during the entire play he was messing with them, torturing or enslaving people. He then at the end is like, I won't take my revenge because I forgive you. Sir, your whole forgiveness thing doesn't matter if you've already enacted some of your revenge. I personally much prefer Macbeth or A Midnight Summer's Dream. Macbeth I found to have an interesting story and theme that stuck to till the end, while A Midnight Summer Dream is a comedy and it is funny. Overall, The Tempest is not a bad play. I just don't like romance, which causes me to dislike it over other plays. And I found it to be a little scrambled. So I guess, after everything, maybe Shakespeare didn't have a deal with some demons. After all, if he did, then some magic should have at work and every play should have been a hit. But seeing as they aren't, it puts some doubt in that theory. Oh well, what can you do but go back to the drawing board?